Good morning, all. We set aside this time for brief announcements that will be of interest to our community and friends. Please be succinct when announcing upcoming events and updates. If you have an announcement, please line up on the ramp or the aisle or raise your Zoom hand. When Andy and I call on you, come up to the podium or unmute yourself and speak.
Next Saturday at Rockcore Yoga from 1 o'clock till vaguely 3 o'clock, we're going to be doing another sound-centered chakra meditation. So anybody who's interested in experiencing that, 1 to 3 at Rockcore Yoga. If you need to know more, ask me.
Let us take a moment to still our hearts, quiet our minds, and center ourselves. There are moments in our lives, there are moments in a day when we seem to see beyond the usual. We become clairvoyant. We reach then into reality. Such moments of our greatest happiness, such moments are our greatest wisdom. It is in the nature of all people to have these experiences. But in our time and under conditions of our lives, it is only a rare few who are able to continue in the experience and find expression for it. Words by Robert Henri. Ted will light the chalice here in the sanctuary. Those of you at home are invited to light your own chalice now. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has a cause to think with great gratitude of those who have lit the flame within us in our community. Before we sing the first hymn, let me remind the remote participants to leave yourselves muted. However, we want whoever is with you and to sing with us as big and loud as you like. Make it a joyous experience. Please stand in body or spirit and sing the opening hymn, number 330, The Arching Sky of the Morning Glows. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church community of Cambria. We are glad you have joined us today. Our UUCC sanctuary sits on land that the indigenous peoples, primarily the Salinan tribe, historically inhabited. We honor their ongoing contribution to this region and give thanks for the opportunity to gather in faith on their unceded territory. Let us respect their legacy and protect their history as we occupy this sacred space. As Unitarian Universalists, we celebrate religious diversity and welcome all who journey in search of faith and spirituality. The UUCC is a lay-led congregation run by the democratic process. We invite speakers from different religious traditions and spiritual or scientific backgrounds, as well as community leaders to speak at our pulpit. We encourage presentations covering a variety of topics and areas of interest that connect with the UU's 7 principles and 6 values: equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, justice, and interdependence, with love at the center. Today's service centers around the 3rd principle. We affirm and promote acceptance of one another and encourage spiritual growth in our congregations. My name is Julia Stannard, and I am your worship associate for this morning's service. Good morning. We extend a special welcome to today's guests and visitors. We are glad you joined us today. If you wish, please introduce yourself or your guest. If you are not on the mailing list, please visit the UUCC website at uuccambria.org so we can keep you informed of all our activities. Members and friends, please check out the newsletter sent to you every week. This is a great way to keep up to date with our latest news. To see this or any of the past Zoom services or recordings can be found on the UUCC website. So good morning and welcome to everyone. The affirmation is both a recognition of the nature of this community as well as a promise to which we aspire. Let us now recite the affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and freedom, and to help one another. Now is the time for sharing your heartfelt joys and concerns with this, your spiritual community. Please feel free to come forward. Briefly express a personal celebration, sorrow, reflection, or gratitude. The collective flames of these candles embody all the joys and concerns which may have gone unspoken today, but are also deeply felt in our community. The first reading are quotes by Robert Henri, author of The Art Spirit, an American painter and teacher in the late 1800s. The object isn't to make art, it's to be in that wonderful state which makes art inevitable. Don't worry about originality. You could not get rid of it even if you wanted to. Art cannot be separated from life. It is the expression of greatness, it is the expression of the greatest need of which life is capable, and we value art not because of the skilled product, but because of its revelation of life's experience. Paint the flying spirit of the bird rather than its feathers. When the artist is alive in any person, whatever their kind of work may be, they become inventive, searching, daring, self-expressive creature. They become interesting to other people. They disturb, upset, enlighten, and open ways for better understanding. Where those who are not artists are trying to close the book, artists open the book and show there are still more pages possible. Let us enter a place of peace and serenity where you are one with your spiritual being. Be at peace within your space, with the absence of all that is temporal is a most cherished gift. Let us enter the stillness. May we find the compassion and empathy we need to strengthen relationships. May we find ways to love each other well. May we not judge or condemn, but rather build a beloved community. Today's second reading will be read by Jan Musara.
Today's second reading is from Resurrection Updated, Collected Poems by James Galvin. Let us begin with a simple line, drawn as a child would draw it, to indicate the horizon, more real than the real horizon, which is less than a line, which is visible abstraction, a ratio. The line ravishes the page with implications of white earth, white sky. The horizon moves as we move, making us feel central, but the horizon is an empty shell. Strange radius whose center is peripheral, as the horizon draws us on, withdrawing. The line draws us in, requiring further lines, engendering curves, verticals, diagonals, urging shades, shapes, figures. What should we place in all good faith on the horizon? A stone, an empty chair, a submarine? Take your time, take it easy. The horizon will not stop abstracting us.
Please stand and body your spirit and sing number 124, Be That Guide.
Be that guide whom love sustains, rise above the daily strife, lift on high the good you find, help to deal the hurts of life. Be that helper
Today's talk is titled The Spirit of the Artist, to be delivered by Margaret Biggs. Margaret Biggs is a professional artist and the proud mother of 2 sons. She grew up in the North Gulf Coast of Florida, where a childhood spent exploring the Gulf, beaches, bays, bayous, and forests instilled a lifelong love of nature that continues to shape her work. At 19, she left the Deep South for a 10-year career as a professional model, living in New York City and several cities throughout Europe. There she discovered many of the world's great art masters before studying at the University of Illinois at Chicago, and later with the renowned artist Kerry James Marshall. Margaret's paintings are inspired by nature's beauty and by the healing she found there during life's challenges. She communicates this in her work through strong, peaceful imagery. She has presented several solo exhibitions, and her work is in numerous medical facilities as well as private and commercial spaces nationwide. Recently, Margaret completed 2 large commissions for the medical facility in Riverside, California. Margaret's current solo exhibition is on view at the Cambria Center for the Arts through August 30th, 2026. Margot?
Hey, everybody. Kerry James Marshall is widely recognized as one of the most important contemporary artists of our time. His paintings have transformed conversations and expanded the possibilities regarding figurative representation in art. Drawing upon centuries of European art traditions, Marshall creates richly layered works that celebrate African American culture while challenging historical omissions and assumptions about African American life. Born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1955, Marshall hails from humble beginnings. As part of the Great Migration, his family relocated to a housing project in South Central Los Angeles in 1963 when he was 8 years old. They arrived just a few years before the Watts Uprising, placing him at the center of a community shaped by struggle and social change. The experiences of his youth would profoundly influence his artistic vision and sense of purpose. Marshall once said, "You can't be born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1955, grow up in South Central LA near the Black Panthers headquarters, and not feel like you've got some kind of social responsibility." That sense of responsibility is evident throughout his work. Just a side note, this is titled A Portrait of the Artist as His Former Self, and it's one of his earlier works. And you can see where he's drawing on those early 20th century depictions of African Americans. So to continue, that sense of responsibility is evident throughout his work. His paintings portray the lives, histories, and aspirations of African Americans with dignity, complexity, and beauty, often focusing on people and experiences that had long been overlooked in mainstream art. I remember that same sense of responsibility in Kerry as a professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago. He cared deeply about his students and challenged us to think critically about art and society. In the next slide, titled Souvenir, you can see Martin Luther King, John and Robert F. Kennedy or Robert Kennedy and John F. Kennedy, and then other notable people that have to do with influencing African American life, and the In Memory of above the window. His influence continues to grow internationally, exemplified by an exhibit just last year when the Royal Academy of Arts in London presented Kerry James Marshall, The Histories, the largest survey of his work ever shown in Europe. Featuring more than 70 works, it will be exhibited throughout the continent until 2027. Marshall's impact extends beyond painting. In 2023, Washington National Cathedral unveiled Now and Forever, his first stained glass commission. The windows replace memorial windows honoring Confederate Generals Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson, creating a powerful new symbol of racial justice and reconciliation in one of the nation's most significant religious landmarks. And those are close-ups of the two windows. In 2013, Kerry was appointed to President Barack Obama's Committee on the Arts and Humanities. Marshall's achievements have been recognized with numerous other honors throughout his career. One of the earliest was the prestigious MacArthur Foundation Fellowship, also called the Genius Grant, which he received in 1997. Countless awards have followed. What makes the MacArthur Genius Grant accomplishment meaningful to me is that I knew Kerry then, as his reputation was rapidly growing. I was fortunate to be both his student and friend from 1993 until the mid-2000s. Kerry once told me that his goal was to have his work included in the art history books. I looked at him with surprise, and he added, "Shoot for the stars and fall short at the mountaintop." He has certainly reached the mountaintop. This is the Royal Academy of London just last fall, one of the several galleries where his work was displayed. I believe his work is now in Zurich, and then it goes on to Paris. In order to realize this lofty goal, he said he planned to do what the masters did. He planned to paint large-scale works, including well-rendered architecture and realistic human form. In those works, he would make use of depth of field and historical references. His intent was very clear, and he knew what he had to do. This was 1993, at which time he was working on the Garden Project series that portrayed the housing projects of LA and Chicago, along with the people who lived there. I was in the first class Kerry James Marshall taught at the University of Illinois at Chicago. What began as a figure drawing class led to an advanced drawing course the following semester, and then later a painting class. 4 hours of class twice a week for 18 months to 2 years. I studied under Kerry, who encouraged, if not demanded, that intellectual discussion be mixed with his tutelage. We were a small group of 5 or 6 students, including me, who became particularly drawn to Kerry's teaching and continue enrolling in his classes throughout 1993 and 1994. Kerry challenged us constantly, often with a single question: why? Whether discussing our own work or the art of another, he pushed us to examine technique and the meaning behind a piece. One memory in particular captures Kerry's teaching style perfectly. He took the class to the UIC graduate student exhibition. As we walked through the gallery discussing the work, I stopped in front of a piece depicting the silhouette of a black figure with exaggerated, unrealistically large lips. It's similar, this is just a side note, this is a lino cut that Kerry James Marshall gave me, a series of 100 that was part of a calendar that he had made. And you can see here the large lips, but this was even more so, and it was done by a graduate student. Kerry stepped up to my side, and I said to him, "No one has lips like that." Without missing a beat, Kerry replied, "That's not the point. The point is, what do you think about people with very large lips?" His answer caught me completely off guard. I had been evaluating the work literally. Kerry immediately shifted the conversation to something much deeper. The artwork wasn't about the size of the person's lips. It was about the assumptions, the judgments, and the cultural meanings we attach to physical features. Again and again, he challenged us to move beyond our first reactions and examine the beliefs hidden underneath them. What was initially a discussion about art often turned into discussion about perception, culture, history, and ourselves. Once again, Kerry had made me aware of how limited my own thinking could be. After 3 or 4 consecutive semesters in his classes, Kerry informed us that the other faculty members felt we should study with different instructors. I didn't like it. We kept following him around. So we did. Still, I had the impression he would have preferred we remain his students, and we certainly would have welcomed the opportunity. Kerry was an exceptional teacher who extended learning beyond the classroom. He organized a visit to the Art Institute of Chicago, invited us to his studio, and generously shared the practical mechanics of drawing and painting. In an art department that often emphasized conceptual concerns over craftsmanship, Kerry valued both. Ideas mattered, but so did skill. Because Kerry and I were only 4 years apart in age, our relationship was somewhat different than that of many younger students and the professors. I had traveled extensively, lived in New York City and Europe, and was deeply committed to my art education. Kerry and I connected quickly through our shared enthusiasm for art and ideas. We also had another connection. I grew up in Pensacola, Florida, just 250 miles south of Birmingham, Alabama, where Kerry spent the first 8 years of his life. We came from the same small corner of the Deep South, yet our experiences could have hardly been more different. My family roots stretch back over 300 years in the Deep South. Over time, I learned that some of my ancestors had been slave owners. Kerry's family lived with the legacy and consequences of that history. Kerry was born in 1955. I was born in early 1960. We grew up a few hundred miles apart, yet in completely different worlds. As a white Southern woman, I witnessed the racism that permeated our culture around me. Kerry and his family experienced directly its devastating effects. Our friendship began in 1993 during the first class he taught at UIC and continued casually until I left the Chicago area in 2009. He attended a Christmas party at our house in Chicago, and he joined my family for an Easter gathering in Indiana. He saw clearly I wasn't your typical Southern white woman. By then, I had lived away from the South for many years and had spent 7 years living in a rough Chicago neighborhood. This is at Easter in Indiana. That's Kerry, and it's my ex-husband to the left, and Bunny, and then that's me a long time ago with my 36-year-old son. As our friendship grew, Kerry continued to challenge me beyond the world of art. He pushed me to question my assumptions, to look more closely, and to think more deeply. It was a privilege I experienced personally, one that Kerry has since offered the world through his art. While attending UIC, I lived a short distance from Cabrini Green, one of Chicago's most notorious public housing developments. These dilapidated high-rises were home to approximately 15,000 residents. By then, it had become synonymous with poverty and crime. I drove through Cabrini Green twice a day, 5 days a week, and like many Chicagoans, I thought I understood what it represented. So this is the entire project was, I don't know how many buildings, but it's this entire area, and some of it extends back there. And then that intersection, there was a 4-way stop sign. I lived just west of there. And the Magnificent Mile of Michigan Avenue is about a mile east. So I used to take my son to daycare regularly, and I'd stop at that 4-way stop sign. I remember one summer day a kid reached his hand in my car to get my purse. You know, it was just, you know, and hearing gunshots at night in our neighborhood in the summer. It was a rough neighborhood. Excuse me. Because of that proximity, I was especially intrigued by the series of public housing projects Kerry began in the early 1990s. He was working on what would become his landmark housing project series while I was his student. The first painting in that series, Many Mansions, from 1994, depicts a public housing project with 3 well-dressed men carefully tending to the gardens in the foreground. It was the first of 5 large-scale paintings inspired by the housing projects in Chicago and Los Angeles, and marked the beginning of Kerry's rise to international prominence. I still have photographs from a class visit to Kerry's South Wabash studio in 1993. In the background is the painting Many Mansions in its early stages. So you can see just above Kerry's head, the figure, the head of the figure, and you'll see it in the painting. You know, this is the early stages of the painting. And that's me in the far left. It was my camera. One day while looking at the painting with him, I questioned the figures he had included in Many Mansions. I said, there aren't people like that in the projects. So see here, see the figure? The man in the middle is what's in the background of the class picture. So I said, you know, there aren't people like that in the projects, I said. Yes, there are, Kerry immediately replied. What makes you think there aren't? Of course there are. His response stopped me cold. What he helped me to understand was that I had unconsciously accepted a stereotype. No, people were not necessarily gardening in their Sunday clothes, and there may not have been any gardens at all. But there were people living there who cared about their homes, who took pride in their surroundings, and who did what they could to make life better for themselves and for their families. The residents of public housing were not simply symbols of urban failure. There were also people who had dignity, aspirations, and a sense of responsibility. I knew that Kerry had spent part of his childhood living in public housing in Los Angeles. At the same time, I was driving through Cabrini Green every day, stopping at that four-way stop sign surrounded by the project's high-rise buildings. The balconies were enclosed with metal grates, and the 1940s buildings were clearly deteriorating. Yet after that conversation, I began to see the people who lived there differently. Sometime later, I was riding the bus west on Division Street, which goes straight through those projects, headed towards Cabrini Green during rush hour. I had boarded a mile or so to the east and was seated near the front. As the bus moved west, it filled with people returning home from work. Soon, every seat was taken, and the aisles were crowded. I was the only white person on the bus. A woman boarded and stood in front of me. Almost immediately, she recognized another woman sitting a few seats away. "Hi," she said enthusiastically. "Where have you been?" "We got out," the seated woman replied, clearly referring to her move out of the projects. The conversation only lasted a few minutes, but the words, "we got out," stayed with me. As the bus continued west, it was clear she was heading home from work, just as everyone else on that crowded bus was. Yet packed into those three words, "we got out," was a story of struggle, sacrifice, and a mother's determination to create a better future for her children. I thought about that woman for a long time. Looking back, I'm not sure I would have paid such close attention to that conversation had I not first spoken with Kerry about many mansions. That was one of Kerry's gifts as an artist and as a teacher. He didn't simply make paintings. He changed the way people looked at the world. In my case, he changed the way I looked at Cabrini Green, the people who lived there, as well as the people in my own neighborhood, a short distance away. He taught me to look and to see people with greater curiosity and compassion. Another early painting that left its imprint on me is Lost Boys from 1993, a large 100 by 120-inch painting that was new at the time I first encountered it. It depicts two young boys. One sits in a coin-operated race car commonly found outside grocery stores at the time. The other stands nearby holding a plastic squirt gun. Looking loosely wrapped around a tree is a yellow police barrier tape used for crime scenes with the words "Do not cross" clearly visible. The tree bears the word "life" carved into its trunk. The title, Lost Boys, refers to the orphan children in Peter Pan who never grow up. My conversation with Kerry about the piece was brief. He spoke about summer and how the boys in the city spend their time. Little more was said, yet, as often is the case with Kerry, what remained unspoken was just as important as what was said. He had visited our home. He knew the neighborhood where I lived. He knew I heard gunshots on summer nights. He knew I saw boys with these regularly at the grocery store, on the sidewalk, or at the bus stops. Kerry was asking me to deeply see them, not merely to notice them in passing, but to really see them. The painting's reference to Peter Pan initially seems playful, but it quickly becomes heartbreaking. These boys are lost in a very different sense. Kerry compels the viewer to recognize that. For many young black boys, growing up is not a guarantee. Violence, poverty, discrimination, incarceration, and social neglect place countless obstacles in their path. Many will never reach adulthood. Like Neverland, America can be a place where some children never get the chance to grow up. In Lost Boys, Kerry transforms an ordinary summer afternoon into a meditation on vulnerability, mortality, and the fragility of childhood. The painting acknowledges both the innocence of youth and the harsh realities that threaten African American children. What struck me most was that this reality existed all around me. By then, I had lived in that Chicago neighborhood for over 7 years. The people Kerry painted were my neighbors. I'm reminded of another Lost Boys painting moment that revealed yet another essential about Kerry's approach to painting. During a visit to a studio, I noticed that one of the first portraits from the Lost Boys series hanging on the wall. A thin stream of white paint had dripped down the surface and stopped just above the subject's eye. The effect was striking. I was fascinated. "How did you allow yourself to just let that paint drip?" I asked. "I walked out of the room," he replied. Classic Kerry. The drip had not been planned, yet instead of correcting it, he allowed gravity to continue its work. By chance, and by Kerry's willingness to accept chance, the paint stopped at precisely the right moment, just above the eye. The result was powerful, and I thought it was brilliant. That comment revealed Kerry's artistic courage, which brings us back to a phrase Kerry used in our class. You have to be willing to risk it all. More than 30 years later, those words still come to my mind when I paint. Many of the most important lessons I learned from him had very little to do with technique. He taught me to question my assumptions, to look beyond appearances, and understand that art reveals as much about the viewer as it does about the subject being viewed. One of the ideas Kerry returned to repeatedly was the importance of questioning the narrative. By that he meant not only the stories we tell as a nation or as a culture, but also the narratives we carry within ourselves, the assumptions we inherit, often without even realizing it. He encouraged us to question everything. One day before class, I was talking about taking my young son to visit a friend from his daycare. William often went with me on campus when daycare was closed, and Kerry knew him. There were two little girls in William's class with the same first name. And William asked which Jessica we were going to go see. The one with dark skin, I replied. Or perhaps I said the one with black skin. I don't remember. What I do remember is Kerry's response. Keep in mind that the term African American was not used at that time. Why did you say the girl with black skin? He asked. Because it's a dominant physical characteristic, I replied. He wasn't satisfied. But why? He asked. I tried again. I explained that I didn't know the children's last names and that the skin color seemed like the most obvious distinguishing characteristic. But why? He asked again. Looking back, it's the only time I remember Kerry showing me even the slightest hint of frustration. In retrospect, I could just as easily have said, the one with black hair. Again and again, he challenged me to recognize my own unconscious habits of thought, the use of words, my perceptions, and to question where they came from. Kerry had a way of planting questions that continued to linger in my mind long after the conversation had ended. Our friendship continued after I left UIC and moved to the suburbs in 1996. I remember one afternoon Kerry called me to talk about his work. The conversation lasted quite a while. The next day, I listened to an interview with Kerry, one of his first, if not the first, on NPR. As I listened, I realized it was almost exactly the same conversation we had shared the day before. Though I didn't know it at the time, it became clear that Kerry had been thinking through his upcoming interview and had rehearsed it with me. One afternoon, this is when we were still living in the city, my then husband called and asked me to check on his photography studio because the alarm had gone off. It had happened before. He was out of town. The building was located in a sketchy neighborhood, only a few blocks from Kerry's studio. My young son, William, was with me. He was 3 or 4. As I was driving, I became uneasy. What if this wasn't another false alarm? What if someone actually had broken in? I decided to stop by Kerry's studio and asked if he would come with me. I rang the bell, but received no answer. As I turned to walk back to my car, Kerry happened to pull up. He rolled down his windows and asked what was going on. And I explained the situation and asked if he would come with me. At first he hesitated. And then William walked up. And seeing him, he agreed to come with me. The 3 of us entered the building. As I struggled with the alarm system, I asked, "Do you know how these things work?" "No," he abruptly replied. Then he sat down on a chair near the door and didn't move. At first I thought his behavior was a little odd, but as I walked through the studio, I realized what he was doing. He wasn't going to touch anything. Not the door, certainly not the alarm panel, not a single object. He sat in one place and waited. Only later did I realize the full significance, only later did the full significance of that moment sink in. The alarm had gone off. The police could have arrived at any time. If they had entered the building and found a black man inside a commercial space that wasn't his, with a white woman and a child present, he could have found himself in an extremely difficult situation. Kerry understood that the moment I asked him to come with me. I did not. Yet, despite the risk, he came anyway. He came because a friend had asked for help. That is the kind of man Kerry James Marshall is. When people speak of Kerry today, they rightly celebrate his extraordinary accomplishments as an artist. They talk about the exhibitions, the awards, influence, and the paintings that changed the course of contemporary art. I think about those things too. But I also think about the teacher who kept asking why, the artist who taught me to look more carefully, the friend who trusted me enough to rehearse ideas before an interview, the man who challenged my assumptions, expanded my understanding of the world, the friend who showed up when I needed help. Kerry was never interested in giving easy answers. He was and is interested in helping people wake up and ask better questions. He taught me to look deeper, to question my assumptions, and to challenge the narratives I accepted about myself and others. Many of those questions have stayed with me for more than 30 years. Some of them I'm still answering. Thank you.
The morning offering will now be given and received. Please remember, we are a self-sustaining congregation and provide all financial resources for our many ministries. We recognize the spiritual value of generosity and invite you to participate. If you're viewing this service remotely, please use one of the methods shown on the screen. Our thanks for all the gifts given and received for the work of this community. And a special thanks to Judy, for visiting us here today. Oh. Please stand in body or spirit and sing the closing hymn. Number 158. Praise the source of faith and learning.
Praise the source
As we prepare to extinguish the chalice, let us recite the valediction. We extinguish the flame of this chalice, and we know that the light of truth and love and the warmth of this community go with us until we meet again. Please extinguish your own chalice at home now. Let us form a circle and join hands. Margot.
Kerry taught me that great art is not simply about what we see, it is about helping others to see more deeply. My hope is that we all leave here today looking at the world and at one another with a little more curiosity, compassion, and wonder. Thank you for emerging.